Anne is one of those curators who's been working all over the world. We've been working in the Global South a lot. You've been working here and there. And you're also teaching in Bergen. A lot now. Yeah. Too much? No, just today. And you have also been very engaged in this project, which is called the Dream Contract. And we also invited you to host a little workshop with us tomorrow. So, but for now, we just asked you to present briefly what is the Dream Contract project. So, thank you so much for coming.
I don't know. It seems easy. I'm going to do like you do. I'm going to lean it on my chin. Yeah. And also I have this, so hello everyone, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for listening to this wonderful little story that I'm about to tell. I have this, because I'm in Sweden and I grew up very close to the border, that's my disclaimer. I just feel like I want to do this. Does anyone get the reference? This is like Swedish television for children in the early 80s. Allan Edwall used to tell stories. Does anyone remember? And he would sit in a chair like this, and he would tell stories that were completely absurd, and I would be mesmerized. So I have to do that. Maybe I don't. Anyway, I acknowledge the fact that I'm speaking on this land, which is a complex land, just like Norway. So I think what I'll do is take you through a few slides that will share with you how this dream contract started, because it's been kind of in the working for a few years, and it's really response to a situation that I think many of us feel, which is that we might not always have the tools that we need at our disposal, and that we, when we work as independent curators, can feel quite lonely. But we are not alone, and that's important to remember, and I think your introduction also spoke to that. So I want to share with you that this is the English title of the survey that Silja was talking about, that was done in 2016-2017 by the Board of Norwegian Association of Curators. And if you want to just get access to the survey, you can use this QR code when the slide is there. It's also very easy to Google. I just thought it looked nice. So it's a method I'm using today. Nice slides. It's a survey that was done, and you all rushed to make it ready for an event in Amsterdam in November 2017, and it was a conference that I did together with Vivian Sehel as Frontier Imaginaries, and it was called Humans of the Institution. And it was an attempt at gathering people who worked freelance within the art world, specifically looking at it from a curator's perspective, but also including many of our friends from institutions, because I don't think that we can have this conversation all by our lonesome. We need to include the institutions that we work with and for in that, in the context that we are. And it looked like this. It was a really nice few days. It was housed within a performance space, which also was nice, that we were not in a visual art space, that we were there to kind of perform this conversation together. And after 2 days of intense conferencing, we gathered in different working groups, and I just wanted to show you this from the outcome from the conference, which is a book, PDF anthology, which is called Towards an Infrastructure of Humans. And it consists of quite lengthy introductions by Vivian and myself, but also really nice working group statements. And this is the one that Silja took part in organizing, together with Platform BK and Wage. And here is again another QR code. With stars. It's the documentation of the conference, which is this PDF, which is also freely downloadable, very easy to Google. But again, the QR code does look nice, doesn't it? Oh, can you imagine how much fun I had with this? But not only did it result in this anthology, which actually came 2 years later, because at the end of the conference we were exhausted. As we, even though I had a job, which actually gives me an income, because I do work as a professor, we were completely wiped. So the book came 2 years later. But we co-published it with the Van Abbe Museum, which was really nice, because they have a very nice template, first of all, practical. There's a template for this book. And secondly, because they have an online space that is fairly well known, so it's a good distribution channel. So those are the pragmatics. And then, I forgot to start my timer, so God knows, you stop me when it's done. But also, certain of the participants in the conference oh no, sorry. I messed up my slides. I'm gonna skip. So certain of the participants of the conference, namely in this case Platform BK, who you worked with, Silja, and Katja Kurpenikova, who was one of our other individual and freelance curators, they thought that the discussion on working conditions and fees were so important that they teamed up to do this in the Netherlands. And I tried online to search for the result, but unfortunately that's not so easy to Google, because it might be in Dutch. No QR code for that. But there is at least an affinity between artists and curators, which I think is maybe the nicest thing about this, although I didn't find the result, but there was, because Platform BK is traditionally an organization that works with and for artists. So this expansion into the field of the curatorial, I thought was very nice. So these are kind of the background that links it to the context where it comes from, the stream contract. But maybe just as important is that it links to certain signs of the time, let's say. Because you have things like this, which has come out recently, which is the Rehearsing Hospitalities project from Frame, with Jussi and all of his wonderful colleagues. And this access rider, for instance, was important to the work that we did on the Dream contract, which I'm kind of slowly getting to. So this is a very positive sign of the times. People are doing this work. We are looking into our working conditions. We want to have better frameworks. We want to share with people how we want to work and make it into a formal situation. But then you also have situations like this, which some of you might remember. 2 years ago, almost to the day, because this is the previous Momentum Biennial, where the curator basically, is it possible to say got fired? There was a conflict. They were removed. There was a conflict. It's very difficult to say exactly what happened because nothing is public. But what we do know is that there was a contestation of copyright, of intellectual labor, of payment, of visibility, and all of the things. And it's kind of documented in these news spreads. This is from Klassekampen, which is the Norwegian left-leaning newspaper, but they are also the only daily that does take cultural things, I think, structures very seriously and discuss them properly. So as you can see, there is a picture of Silja saying very smart things from the position of the curator. Because this newspaper is also interested in the curatorial, which is kind of the only newspaper that uses the word curator with some kind of ease. And they don't go like curator or any other denomination of that. Or like curator. They just go like these people exist and they do a job in the cultural field. So there you go. So that's a bit of the maybe not so happy sign of the times, because it has to do with, there was a settlement outside of court, by the way. So we lost the opportunity in Norway to discuss what intellectual property for curators really is, which is a shame, because, so that happened. But I think we have some kind of protection anyway in just general copyright law, but it would have been fun to have had this case come up. But I also understand the cost that is for people involved and institutions involved. So this combined with, at that time, maybe 4 cohorts of master students at the curatorial practice MA that I teach, and many of you may be familiar with this MA, but some of you may not. It's a 2-year seminar-based education for professional curators, so they need to have at least 2 years of experience as a practicing curator to apply, and which means that the groups that I convene are fairly professional. They are very often directors of small institutions. They might be curators in museums. They might be freelancers. They might be, you know, many different things. And somehow the groups kind of gel. Like, it's almost every other time the group is very institution heavy, and every other time it's quite freelance heavy. So it's not really a conscious thought. I think it's just the way it is. But it means that in this very closed room that we have when we have teaching seminars, and also very confidential space, there is a lot of sharing about their working conditions, because we're trying to deal with them. And it's an international MA, so we get to know many things about many contexts. And I now know that there is always one in this group that will have very serious problems with the place that they work. Be it as a freelancer or as in an institutional capacity. There's always, like, I'm going to go with a major crisis in someone's work life that comes around the table. So after having done this a few times, I was like, surely, also with my own experience working as a freelancer, but also having run institutions and kind of understood what the complexity of having a guest is, surely we could do this better, couldn't we? You know? So that's when I reached out to the, again, Norwegian Association of Curators, which is a very lovely collaborator. And I proposed that we should have a workshop together. And I called it a curator's dream contract, because it is based on also my own experience of being a curator, that the contract that you sign is very often weak in the Norwegian context. There is a lot of things that are understated. There is a lot of goodwill. There is a lot of habits. There are a lot of bias. There are a lot of all the good and the bad things. But I was like, other professions, including cultural professions, do have huge contracts that they use and that they accept, and that doesn't, you know, stop their creativity. It doesn't stop their collaboration, rather the opposite. So we put our minds together, and I did a preliminary, let's call it literature review, which is basically me and Google, you know how it goes. But it was also because I wanted the workshop that we did in December of 21 to be self-generating, like I wanted it to come from us, but I also needed to have some kind of background to share. So I asked everyone, all of my students and everyone from the Norwegian Association of Curators, but also from the Young Artists Society, who offered us space for this workshop, represented by their director, Miriam Weistrich, who's also a curator, to do some background in their own archives, like what contracts have they signed before? Maybe what contracts did they not sign before? Do any of their friends or in their institutions that they work for have contract templates that they wanted to share with us? And everything would be confidential, but it would also be like, you know, substantial real life stuff that would go into it. And what I found is that many of the contract and guidelines that I could find online were either very much focusing on the relationship between the independent curator and museum, so the museum institution particularly, represented by things like the guidelines for hiring guest curators by museums from the College Art Association, which is in the US, or the Contrat de service professionnel communautaire. My French is very bad, but it's the Museum of Quebec, and the contract is actually quite good. It's a really interesting, it's more flexible than the US one, it was my observation. And the other kind of contract and guideline set that I found were the ones that I think we also know quite well from this context, which is the artist contract, which deals specifically with one work of intellectual property that is exhibited within the walls of somewhere. And we also knew it from the working group that you took, that you did in Amsterdam, Silja, with Wage in the US, who's, of course, as we know, come quite far in that context. So it's very impressive. So we sat together December afternoon and day, and we figured this out. This is not the contract, this is the preamble, but look at the QR code. That will take you straight to the current dream contract. And for those of you who are staying for tomorrow, this is when you get your phone out. And you know, you do that thing because then you have the contract that we're going to discuss tomorrow, and then you might even have time to read it over breakfast, or when you can't fall asleep tonight, or whatever. It's the 10-page document, which is so exciting. And I will promise you that when you start reading it, it's actually exciting, because you're like, oh, I haven't thought about that. Because it's collective knowledge in one document. But the preamble, and I will read it to you because I think it has some highlights that I've also highlighted pedagogically enough. Curatorial practice is intrinsically collaborative. These collaborations are at the best of time driven by interest and desire that are aligned. Nevertheless, negotiating a contract at the beginning of a collaboration can be part of a useful practice to safeguard a common understanding of how the collaborators together will reach their common goal. Sometimes collaborations are driven by more pragmatic concerns. I'm sure you recognize both of these positions. Negotiating a contract can provide for meaningful conversations in such situations to find a common platform, collaboration, and agreement on goals and ways of implementation. So, thank you. Yes. We have service on Sunday from 11. But I think that we most often will find ourselves in a combination of these. So like we have both interest and desire, but we are also pretty pragmatic, because I think that's what we need to be. So since this wonderful, pretty cold December day in Oslo, you were homesick, weren't you? Sorry. You were on Zoom. We had a few people on Zoom. Like, it was one of those December days when we were like, "Ooh, more coffee." That was 21. But then we have also revised this contract once in December 22. And we did that in Portland, Oregon, together with a lawyer called Ben Kerr, who's an amazing lawyer in Seattle, who does a lot of pro bono work for artists, and he has a few big clients that funds his passion for art. So he's a very also pragmatic guy, but comes from this extremely contentious space of US law, where, as we know from TV, "I'll sue you," is like, that's a sentence that is used in real life. It's not only on television. So he's very interested in safeguarding artists' rights. And then when I know him actually from COVID, because we had to move all our training and teaching online. And he did an online workshop with us with the previous cohort dealing with intellectual property rights. So when I was going to Portland, I thought, and we already had done one draft of the dream contract, I thought, why not invite him? It's also nice to have meetings in person with people that we've worked with during COVID, so that's one of my interests, because we had such a broad spectrum of people that would step up for us in the MA during COVID, obviously remunerated, but so it was a way of distributing money, but still to meet in person. And then for him to kind of put his mind and his intelligence towards curators as well. And although he didn't necessarily know exactly what a curator did, he was very interested in this freelance position. So that exists as a revised draft, but it's not published yet, because I need to get him to go through it.